Alright, this is Mav with the Wretched Army podcast. Uh, kind of trying to realize an idea that I've had for a while, uh, mainly for STO's PvP. We haven't gotten any new maps in 2 years, and we've actually lost a map, if you remember the Space Siege PvP map. And I came up with this idea 3 or 4 months ago that if the Foundry had the proper tool set available to it, mainly in the form of creating objectives to where two teams of actual players and not NPCs and stuff could interact and have, like, winning conditions and things like a PvP map could, you could theoretically kill two birds with one stone. Number one, massive amounts of new PvP content could be created with the Foundry, and number two, which is kind of like the side benefit, you get more people involved in the Foundry. So I thought I would take a crack at just throwing together a quick Foundry map, and this is the first time I've ever made a Foundry map. I've never really played around with it or anything, and I'm just running through this with Fraps to get a quick recording. This is just basically how I would see, and keep in mind, this is just a template just to show some basics, right? The more advanced details could obviously be hashed out later on. Uh, Basically, what could be a CTF map, capture the flag. Now, obviously, it would be two teams. Hopefully, actually, it'd be cooler if we could get more too, but we'll start with just two for now. Just a basic ground map. There are two default spawning points, one for each team. This little cylinder here that I put in just represents the flag placeholder, right? And the enemy base is pretty much perpendicular to the other side with their own flag representing a cylinder, or vice versa. And basically, it's just generic capture the flag. Now, aside from the two default spawning points, I've set 5 random spawn points all across the map, and each one is not right on top of each other. That's the first key thing to a map, is to make sure not having spawn points where you can just spawn right on top of someone's enemy base and just camp them. Now, that does mean you may randomly spawn and, hey, an enemy player spawns nearby. That's normal for something along the lines of capture the flag. Now, basically, with capture the flag, you want to have generally some form of buildings or objects to kind of get in the way. And the first thing I thought of was basically two sniper towers. Now, in the Foundry, how would you get it up there? Possibly a dialogue box or an object you interact with, similar to how in Deep Space Nine you would interact with a turbo lift door on the bottom of the promenade and it pops you up to the top. Same thing here. And with sniper rifles having the farthest in-game attack, how awesome would it be to have one or two or however many guys on your team up on one of these sniper towers, just defending. Each side has their own sniper tower in their base, and there's one kind of in the middle. That one I need to place a little better. That's my own amateur building placement, but you get the idea, right? Each side also has basically 3 main little buildings they can kind of take cover on. And importantly, I kind of tried to scatter, and again, it's my amateur placement, so bear with me on the placing and the tuning of things, but to scatter out buildings across the map. And since the new ground combat now allows you to break cover, or actually gain cover by breaking line of sight with something taller than you, having objects taller than the player scattered across the map would be great ways to break line of sight and have someone lose sight of you, so you can stop and a little Foundry error there, and regen shields or whatever. Now, each base with a flag, there's, as you can see, there's multiple ways in and around these things. There's an unlimited number of ways you can come in, from the sides, from the front, maybe kind of sidewind your way up a sniper tower and kamikaze off. grab the flag, get back to your base, and it's just your basic CTF map, right? You would be able, if we had the tools in the Foundry to set, hey, 5 flag caps wins the match, 10 flag caps, whatever. Now, I don't know of a way in the Foundry, again, personally as an amateur, to have a player character pick up an object and carry it necessarily. But a workaround that I thought of was there's many times in missions where you go talk to an NPC that, you know, you have to lead back to a certain area, like a typical escort mission, escort this guy to this area and make sure he doesn't die, right? So why not disguise a flag? And there's plenty of banners and things in the Foundry assets that you can use to represent a flag, and just disguise that as like an NPC and say, if a player interacts with this NPC, the flag visually, which would be representing the NPC, will be very closely trailing behind the player. So in essence, he's actually carrying the flag, but moving it around. And you can have them, you come down here, you interact for a very short cap time, like 3 seconds or something, to pick up the flag, and then boom, you're off. You're going through the middle, you're dodging fire with various rock formations or whatever, whichever objects you want to use. Make your way back to your base over here, touch your flag cylinder or whatever placeholder, cap the flag, right? And you could have various things where and it really comes down to the nitty gritty of how you want to build a CTF match. Do you want the flag carriers to gain a debuff after a certain amount of time to prevent turtling or stalemates where there's large gaps of time? I would have to research further into how in the Foundry you could do that, but that's where, getting help from Cryptic to let us say, hey, I'm all the way back here at the base, I'm turtling behind one of our main buildings, I've got a pocket healer or two back here, my engineers set up all kinds of doohickeys, and we're just waiting for the other team to make a mistake and drop the flag and get it returned so we can cap. Personally, for PvP, that does not make for interesting PvP. That makes for very boring PvP because matches devolve into stalemate situations where you're just waiting for someone to make a mistake. You're going to want some form to diminish that and make it so that the gameplay stays fast and action paced. So that's one challenge the Foundry will have for making PvP maps, is some type of condition for the scenario to prevent those types of things. And like I said, this is just a rough placeholder of, hey, here's how you would kind of build a map. And I just threw in Klingon and Federation just to show you, some differences. And, if it turns out to be two Federation versus Federation teams, you could just duplicate, the Federation buildings here and here on the other side of the map. Or if it's two Klingons, vice versa. That way, at least artistically or stylistically, it would visually look the same if you're really worried about that kind of thing. Again, that might be something that we might need some type of tool in the Foundry from Cryptic to kind of help us. I'm not a big Foundry guy, so I don't know all the nuances or anything. But, this is just a basic map, and this took me all of maybe 20 minutes to actually go in and create. Actually, the hard part was actually going in and figuring out the triggers and everything just to get into the map so I could actually demo record it. But from just a layout standpoint, how awesome would it be if I could take a terrain, this is just like a generic ground map that goes on forever and really goes nowhere, and say, okay, here's my basic map, pretend none of these buildings are here, and say, okay, I'm going to take these rocks and put them over here, make a big, mountain range or a walk wall, and we're going to put a flag here and a flag there, and, have at it. And that's just one game type. That's just capture the flag. You could still have, team deathmatch matches on this map. Just set a condition in the custom queue when you're making the PvP challenge with your buddies or your fleet mates and say, okay, we don't have enough for a good capture the flag map, but let's say we want to do some team deathmatch or something. Same thing, take the flags out, you still got a pretty neat looking team deathmatch map. And there's plenty of other things you can do with PvP, capture and hold some of these buildings as control points. Put a little interactive terminal here or something that you need to stand there and, interact with for 30 seconds, take control of the building, gain resources, just like the space map, but on ground. Like Shantytown is kind of supposed to be, but not as awkward, you know? And the Foundry, provides unlimited resources. This is just like one cool ground map, that are among dozens that you could put in. And there's like no weather effects. I didn't put any, atmosphere effects or weather effects or special effects, lighting effects, none of that. This is just a stock ground map. Imagine all the people out there that make the great Foundry missions that have all these visually awesome stuff and just throw them in there or team them up with some guy that can come up with a banging PvP idea and let them have at it. With this, it's a winning combination. All we need is certain tools from Cryptic in the Foundry to let us set, like winning conditions and things like that. Or better yet, here's an idea for Cryptic. Take this and make it. Like, you guys have the tools. Obviously, you have the coders. You guys know this way better than any of us ever will. So, make stuff like this. If I can whip this up in 5 minutes, pretty much, kind of almost, maybe 20, and then, you know, if I had the ability to put in all the stuff that says, hey, here's Team A, here's Team B, here's a flag, here's a time limit, here's a cap limit, go. There's a brand new PvP map you could put out there, or at least put on Trouble and let people play around and beta test it or something, And 2 years we have gone with nothing. In 2 years. Just saying, Cryptic, Just an idea, my 2 cents. Later, folks.